and it was a massive success. It was just me and my brother. It was like crazy. People were all over us. I had the tiniest little booth, and you know, it sort of blew us away. And partly I think it was. That's always very exciting when that happens to you. But it was also the style of jewellery we were doing. I mean, by then I'd gone sort of very edgy. So I had my coloured stone jewellery, but I'd also sort of taken on this sort of, I don't know, to be honest, I can't even think what I was thinking, but whatever I was doing, I was taking on a very selfish sort of slant to my jewellery, and I started to do all this jewellery that was like inspired by tattoos, and doing it in diamonds, and doing it in you know, black diamonds and white diamonds and rubies and all these things. And I remember a lot of my friends were kind of, Steve, you know, what do you think you're doing? You know, something like this might be like $20,000 and it's like inspired by a tattoo. And they said, nobody's going to want it. Well, they all wanted it. And that was about 14 years ago now. So it was quite radical. At the time it was quite radical. And it put us on the map instantly. So suddenly we went from being a sort of a nobody knowing us at all to all these stores in America literally sort of just lining up to, because it's a trade show, so it's like doing the spring fair or something. You're selling to shops. So suddenly we were stopped in all these shops, and it was very American, but that was okay. America's a really big place, and so we were sort of building the business over there, and still wasn't too much going on for me, but I wasn't trying, so it was sort of all right. And along the way, I still had my interest in coloured stones. That wasn't going to leave me. It wasn't like I'd just gone that route. I started to play around with coloured stones. And what I've done here is I've sort of demonstrated this technique, which I don't know if anyone's ever heard of a doublet. It's a very old-fashioned thing. They used to really use it with a very, very thin slice of usually opal, and they put a cabochon of crystal on the top, and usually a piece of, well, if it was a triplet, it would have 3 layers, a doublet's 2, and a piece of maybe onyx or something on the back to stop the light shining through. And this would make this very sort of expensive material, opal, appear to be something much bigger. And that was why they did it. It was just to make it appear bigger. And I had this sort of idea that I could take a very inexpensive piece of material, it didn't matter, I mean this is a piece of turquoise, and I could cut it and put on the top a piece of faceted quartz. And so rather than just making it look bigger, it wasn't really about that, it didn't matter if it looked bigger because it wasn't very expensive, it was only turquoise, but I could give it this really glamorous look, and I was playing around with this for about 2 years. I knew that if I got it right, it would really be amazing, because every now and again I got it right, but the failure rate was huge, because I know Jason here knows, he used to cut some of the bits underneath, and because you can't bend a stone, obviously you've got to cut it, you've got to cut the dot and the top, so it's wasteful, and it's a very thin piece of material, the piece underneath, the piece with the colour is very thin. So, but like I said, when it got right, I don't know if you could see there with that ring, that turquoise, it just was extraordinary. And the problem I was having was the precision with cutting it, because they were being cut by hand, and both the surfaces, so the bottom of the quartz, the cap, and the top of the underlay, the piece providing the colour, had to match up absolutely perfectly. And once you've done that, I had to glue them together. And when you mix glue, it gets lots of bubbles in it. So even if it looks like there's no bubbles, you glue it, you go to bed, you wake up in the morning, there's a bubble right in the middle of it. It happens every single time, and there wasn't anything, it just was so frustrating. You've got to sort of like smash it and get rid of it and start again. And so I went to glue school. I phoned the people at Loctite down the M4, just by where they do all the Formula 1 stuff, and I was given a white coat and I went to glue school, and these people are as high as a kite, I'm telling you, they wander around the platform like they don't know which way's up, and they were so fun because they kept telling me there's a solution. They couldn't get it, right? They couldn't get the solution. Loctite could not find it. There was all sorts of super glues, but they just did not work. And I was very close to giving up, but I was obsessed with this bloody thing, and I would be there literally at 3 o'clock in the morning. I would still be in my studio on my own. It wasn't about jewellery anymore, it was about this fucking gluing, and I became obsessed. And somebody put me on to a glass sculptor called Jewellery. Now, there's a Jewellery exhibition in London right now, at the moment in Bond Street. Amazing, amazing glass sculpture. It's from Seattle, Washington, and extraordinary things, like massive, massive sort of glass installations. And somebody had developed this product that was for the glass sculpting, where they needed to bond things, and it was this. It didn't even have it was no longer glue, it had a serial number. It was like James Bond stuff, and basically I managed to get some. It was like water, so it was like water. So when it mixed it up, this was the key to it. It didn't have bubbles in it anymore. It was just like water. So you put it on, you put these two things together, virtually nothing left. So it's like if you put something together and it's got water in it, obviously the water will dry out and then it's gone. But this doesn't. It bonds this thing, and after like 3 days, it's created its own sort of tension and everything within it with no bubbles, and that was the key. So once I got that right, I was on a roll, and so because it was a technique, I could design it into anything, and that ring there was the first one, the first design, and like I suppose like a lot of things, you sort of you have your one, no one knows anything, but by then I had a bit of a network of retailers and people were quite dismissive. They were quite dismissive because you were sort of tinkering. You were tinkering with jewellery, you're not meant to do that. You're meant to use it with reverence, and I wasn't showing it much reverence, and I was putting it in 18 karat gold with diamonds. But you know what? Very, very quickly, I noticed that women, because it was predominantly for women, when they saw it, they were just blown away by it. They didn't care if you tinkered with it. They didn't give a shit. It was like really great colour, looked glamorous, brilliant, and so I knew I was onto something, and through a bizarre set of circumstances, I got to meet Madonna, and she bought one of these rings, and I didn't ever see her again. She just bought it. That was it. I was very excited about it, but I didn't see her. Anyway, that was about 8 months before she met Guy Ritchie. This is before they were married, and I was in a Chinese takeaway, and I'd ordered my Singapore noodles and crispy duck and stuff, and there was the Daily Mirror. And I opened the Daily Mirror up and just looking there, and there was that photograph. It was like a full-page photograph, and I was like, "Oh my God, this fucking ring! Look at it! It's there, it's Crystal Hayes," and it was amazing, right? So very quickly we kind of started to sort of, in our excitement, tell people. But already, In Style magazine in America, I'd locked onto this thing. They were incredible. They'd noticed this ring was they didn't know whose it was. And she was wearing it on her index finger, and I got this credited with reinventing the cocktail ring, and it all came out of this particular photograph. And then she started wearing this around, and it was like a lot of things, and like it can sometimes happen, doesn't always does, with the right celebrity at the right time. There starts a bit of a trend going on, and very quickly we had all the it girls of America. Everybody wanted this ring. They were all wearing it on their index finger because they're so original, and that was really it. So